Now our new topic is about graphs and motion and graph. So first thing, you should understand the two things about the, like we have x-axis and y-axis. Now in A levels, you will use positive y-axis as well as negative y-axis, both axes for plotting a graph. So the one of the quantity will be on x-axis, another one will be on the y-axis, the vertical. The thing which you have to recognize or identify, number one is what happened to slope. That is one thing. And the second thing, the meaning of what happened to slope, it means, like example, because when there's a graph, the slope might be constant, the slope might be zero, slope might be decreasing, or it may be increasing. These are the things which can happen to the slope. The second thing is a value of the slope. Like example, slope can have a positive value, slope can have a negative value. So value of the slope, when you calculate the slope, you may get a positive answer, you may get a negative answer. So it is easy to identify whether a slope will be positive or negative. If y2 is above y1, then it will be positive. I'll explain this. But if y1 is above y2, then the slope will be negative. Example, the first example, say this is a graph, okay? So whenever you have a graph, two things are there related to slope. One is what happened to slope, like slope is zero, constant, increasing or decreasing. And the second one is value of the slope. So first thing, what happened to the slope in this example? What happened to the slope in this first example? It's a straight line with a constant angle. Slope is constant here. It's not increasing. Slope means angle with x-axis. So if angle with x-axis is not changing, it means the slope is constant. So this is a constant slope. But when you calculate the slope, whether you get a positive answer or negative answer, so how you'll identify? This is a very simple way to identify. First, take any first point on x-axis on the line, and then respective point on y-axis is known as y1, the first point which we took. Then we take a second point, any point on x-axis, and draw a line from that point. That point is known as x2. And the respective point on y-axis is known as y2. So you can see y2 is above y1. So if y2 is above y1, what will be the value of this slope? Like when I calculate the slope, I will get a positive answer or negative answer. So I will get a positive answer. So the reason why this is important, because now you will discuss different types of graphs. So you should be able to draw, like example, you may have a distance time graph. You should be able to draw sketch a speed time or velocity time graph, and from velocity time graph, acceleration time graph. And opposite, if you have an opposite can is also possible, like acceleration time graph. You can plot a speed time graph from that, or velocity time, and from velocity time you can plot a distance time graph. So I will sketch different graphs now to show the idea that what are the possibilities. So we have y-axis and x-axis. First thing, what about the slope? What happened to slope? Like it's constant, zero, decreasing, or increasing? It's a straight line. So here the slope is constant. That's one thing. Then what about the value? Like whether it is a positive or negative. So how you can identify? So when I take the first point on from x-axis and draw a line, so the first point on x-axis, x1, y1. When I take the second point on x-axis, x2, y2. So you can see y1 is above y2. If y1 is above y2, what will be the answer when I calculate the slope of this graph? So it will be negative. Is it clear, this part? The graph, we are discussing the different possible shapes of the graph and identifying what happened to slope and what is the nature, like whether it's positive or negative. Another example. What happened to slope of this line? Slope is increasing. That's right. That's one thing. It is increasing. And what about the value? Whether it's a positive or negative. So when I draw a line, I take the first point, then respective point will be y1, and I take another point, then the second point will be y2. You can see y2 is above y1. So it is increasing and it will be a positive value. If I draw another graph, but in opposite direction, it's also a curve. Maybe it does not appear to be smooth curve, but I meant to make a smooth curve. What about slope of this one? Slope. Slope means angle with x-axis. Actually, two graphs are the mirror images of each other. So this also slope is increasing. How the slope is increasing? Because when you check the angle with x-axis, check this angle here. When I draw x-axis, the horizontal line, the second angle here, So you can see the angle with the x-axis is increasing. So if angle is increasing, the slope is also increasing. But what about the value, positive or negative? What about the value of this slope? It will be negative. Why? Because when I take first value on, so this will be y1, and if I take another value, that will be y2. So you can see y1 is above y2, so it is increasing, but it is negative slope. Means the value will be increasing, but the negative value will be there. What about the slope here? The slope is decreasing. And what about the value of the slope? First thing, slope is decreasing. What about the value of the slope? The value of the slope is positive. And if I sketch the same mirror image of this one, what about slope of this graph? The second one below the negative y-axis. That slope is also decreasing. But what about the value? But the value is negative. What about slope of this graph? The slope. Increasing, decreasing, constant, zero. What about slope of this one? Its slope is decreasing, angle with x-axis decreasing. That's right. And what about the value? Positive or negative? To identify positive or negative, just take first point on x-axis and draw the line that was known as y1, and the second one is y2. So y1 is above y2, so it will be negative. Now if it was other way around, if it's a mirror image, pattern will be same. So slope is, what happened to slope? So what happened to slope of the line which is below the origin? It is decreasing. But what about the value, positive or negative? So it will be positive value. Why? Because when you check the first value on, when you check the first value on x-axis, from x-axis, and then the respective value on y-axis, and then the second value, so you will find that y2 is above y1. This one was y1, the first point, then y2 is above y1. That is why it is positive. And the last one, what happened to slope of this line? Yes. Slope means angle with x-axis. What happened to slope? Increasing, decreasing, constant, or zero? So slope is increasing, the angle with x-axis is increasing. But what about the value? What about the value? So when you check the position, like when you take first point, first you have to take point on x-axis and then draw a line. And the second point from x-axis, draw a line. The first point is known as y1, respective point, and the second point is y2. So you can see y1 is above y2. So if y1 is above y2, then its slope will be negative. What about slope of this line? A mirror image. Increasing, decreasing, constant, or zero? What about slope of this line? It is increasing and it will be positive. So these are the things which you have to keep in mind. Now, why you studied this concept of a slope, as you took in O levels, if you remember, the distance time graph, for a distance time graph, what slope represent? Slope represents speed or velocity. If an object is moving in a straight line, then it will represent speed or velocity. If it's a speed time or velocity time graph, what slope represent? The slope represent acceleration. Acceleration is a change in speed in a unit time, or change in velocity in a unit time. Now, why it is important? For example, say this was a graph given to you, a distance time, or it can be a displacement time. This was a straight line, displacement time or distance line graph to you. So now what about slope of this line? What is the slope of this line? Increasing, decreasing, constant or zero? Slope is constant. And slope for a speed time graph, for a distance time graph, what slope represent? Slope represent speed or velocity. So I can say speed is constant. And what about the value of the speed or the velocity? What about the value of the speed or the velocity? That's constant, like whether it is a positive or negative. That's the second thing. So it will be positive. So if I want to sketch a velocity time graph, so for a velocity time graph, for the same object motion, velocity should be constant and it should have a positive value. So what I will do, I will draw a constant velocity, means the velocity should not change for the same time interval. Is it clear? So using a distance time graph, I worked out the velocity time graph. And from velocity time graph, I can work out acceleration. Because it is a horizontal line, so if it's a horizontal line, what is the slope of this line? What's the slope of horizontal line? So slope of horizontal line is 0. So what it shows that the slope is 0. If slope is 0, what we can conclude, we can say, because for a speed time graph, slope represent acceleration. So we can say acceleration is 0. So for this motion, for this object, if I'm plotting an acceleration time graph, so its acceleration will be 0 for that certain time interval. Is it clear? So using the distance time graph, we can make a velocity time, and from velocity time graph, we can plot acceleration time graph. I'll give more examples. This is one of them, a simple example. Is it clear, this example? So distance time graph, slope represent velocity or speed. Speed time graph, slope represent acceleration or deceleration. I'll share another link, the meeting link. It's like 2 minutes left, so I will not be able to complete explanation. I'm just sharing another link. I'll end this now and share another link with you.